thank you for coming to the JSCB meeting for Thursday, July 26th. I would like to call the meeting to order. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes for the June 28th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Secretary.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
There's new correspondence from Mr. Giardine in your packet. And today we will be addressing the comprehensive plan. We have a significant amendment, actually 2 amendments to do some financial reallocation as we go forward with phase 2. And in addition, there are several contractual items on the agenda. And I'll defer to the program manager to explain those matters in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Joe? No? Report of the program manager? Mr. Gray?
Morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone? Good. So you have our update in front of you for that. So I was just going to kind of go through a couple of highlights there, and then entertain any questions that we have. In terms of procurement, you do have one approval, I believe, on the docket today for Blodgett for the contract approval for that. In terms of procurement. Beyond that, with respect to procurement, we're still evaluating in concert with the construction manager, evaluating strategy going forward in terms of when we bid which buildings when, and how we bid those in terms of whether it be still continue with a single prime or multiple part prime. So something that's still under review at the moment. Under project financing, I just, again, in concert with looking at how we're going to procure the Tranche 2 schools, we're kind of evaluating that in concert with developing a strategy that will enable us to market the project effectively, try not to stack too many buildings too closely together, which is a challenge. But in concert with doing that, looking at the borrowing strategy for when we borrow money. So we're trying to get through 3 different lenses, look at how we develop that procurement schedule. We do have a draft schedule that's out, that's under review at the moment. So, but again, not seeking any action on that. Along with that will be, we know we're going to have to revise the comprehensive plan and go back to OSC for approval. Our target for that is this fall to do that, but we kind of need to have the borrowing strategy and the sequence for bidding worked out to be able to fold that into the revised comp plan. Project design and status, the status approval, we are going to go to SED in August and start to go through approvals. Clary, Elms, Danforth, Corcoran, we're on the docket. We've got some dates set with SED for that, and we're getting some additional ones set up. So that's going to continue through the month of August into September, maybe October, depending on where we are. But our goal is to get, excuse me, get all of those Tranche 2 schools approved by SED in the fall here. So that's where we're headed with that one. Fowler, just to touch base on Fowler, I think we talked last time, we've engaged with a different geotechnical engineer and kind of adopted a different strategy without getting too far into the weeds, essentially to a design concept that keeps us out of the ground for the most part. We still have some leveling we have to do over there at the site, but to try and keep us out of the ground, which our hope is that'll mitigate some of the cost with respect to removal of soils that were there and the contaminated soils that were there. So we're still doing some testing. At the end of this additional testing, we'll have a better idea of the design and the potential for the settlement with this new concept over there. So our hope is, again, to draw down on that. We needed a couple of months to do that. The testing they were out there yesterday scouting it out, and then they'll be out there doing a few more borings. So a couple months there. Ultimately, though, I think what's important there is that we're not going to be having any work going there until spring of 19 at the earliest. And then depending on if we move to that methodology of that, what they call the preloading, which we talked about last time, which is compressing that, it could be another 14 months beyond that before we do anything. So, because we have to put that stone on that field and let it settle for a period of time and monitor it. So, public communications, just underneath there, the school board, we went to the school board earlier in the month here and got approval for, they adopted or approved the projects for Corcoran, Henniger, Nottingham, and we needed to, they approved Clary, Elms, and Danforth, and we needed that approval before we can go to SED for approval by them. EOC, just under public communications, Tim Penix and his team is here with Chris Montgomery and Carol. And I think Tim's going to speak to you about the update on the training program, which you have a separate handout for, which we'll go through here in a moment. The other public communication that's not on your report, but just wanted to communicate to you, is that we had our first labor management committee meeting as part of the administration for the PLA. We had a meeting with the folks there. It's assembled of 3 members from the Trades Council, myself, both the construction management firms, and then a representative from the prime contractors were there. So it was a good meeting. A few things that we've got to follow up on, a few clarifications. I would say, by and large, there's still just a lot of different versions of that rules and how things work, and we're trying to, more than anything, to just try and get everybody on the same level of understanding in terms of how it works. So that's was the biggest component that came out of that. So we're going to continue to do that. We're meeting again on August 1st, and then probably the interval will get a little bit less intense. But until we get things where we want them. So.
Can I ask you a quick question about
Certainly.
Danforth? I see Danforth on there. What exactly are you doing with Danforth?
What are we doing with Danforth? They're a subcontractor for HVAC work on a couple of our buildings. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped to. We have Danforth as a contractor. I'm sorry. My brain went right to Danforth as a contractor. So.
No, the school.
Okay. What are we doing with Danforth? Various renovations inside of the building. We're doing windows. We're doing some masonry restoration. So various renovations. Yeah. So have not started that. Just at Danforth.
Just
that won't be till
approval, yes.
tranche 2. So, yep. Okay. We talked about in the schedule update. I think the highlight there was just the fact that with Clary, Elms, Corcoran, and Danforth going to SED and taking them, and then again we'll be returning to the school board here at the beginning of August to gaining approval for Corcoran, Henniger, and Nottingham, and then those will go to SED for approval. On my center box under critical constraints, we've really touched on it already, but the number of borrowings and that revision and resubmission of the comp plan to the OSC will be a driver for us to be able to put us in a position to move forward with the procurement for phase 2. Under SHPO, it starts with SHPO in the line there. Just wanted to draw to your attention. We had a little bit of an issue there with the windows and the approval from SHPO with respect to how the windows would be configured. We've worked through that now. The windows are ordered. They're coming. I think the net effect is that we're going to probably be working into the fall, probably through up to December at Fraser. But we're working with the administration there to develop a plan to go in and kind of do a one-off remove and replace, and it'd probably be after hours. So, but we're working through that one. The only other one with respect to, we're well into work at several of the buildings. Grant, we've run into a lot of asbestos there that wasn't inside of the walls once we started to do some of the demo in the bathrooms and some of the spaces. Again, we're working through that one, but it has had an impact, certainly in terms of, some surprises that we found there. So we're still working through that one.
On both budget and schedule?
Schedule.
Okay.
Yeah, schedule. Just, unforeseen conditions. Once we start tearing walls apart, we get it every time. So, but we're working through that. But just wanted to bring it to your attention that was of the ones under construction that's been of concern.
So will you complete what you need to complete by the time the children start entering into the building?
Yes, we're developing CNS is working with the contractor over there to develop a recovery schedule to figure out how we get back, everything we need to get back to be able to function. So I will tell you, Pat, I don't know that all the details are complete yet in terms of how we get there with that, but it's an active piece that they're working on. So we'll get you back in. So it's just, yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
safely.
Yeah, no, it's never an option. It's just, sometimes it's how we get there can be interesting. So, but we'll get there.
So Chris, is your project cost, is it still $291? Is that I thought I saw in the budget somewhere that it has increased due to some of the unforeseen. So this is not projected.
We have a resolution today to go from 291 to the legislative limit of 300. The school board has already taken that step and passed a resolution, and so it's here today for you to move from 291. But I appreciate bringing that up. That is another piece that I've identified in my critical issues section here is Determining how that will be allocated is a to-do in terms of how we get there. So step one is to get that increase to the legislative limit, and then we'll figure out the where that gets applied. So, any other questions, comments, concerns?
No. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
You're welcome. Tim is next, right? Or Tim?
Yes, Tim Janik is next with SUNY EOC training program update report.
I believe you all have the submitted report. Otherwise, I'll go through each line for you if you'd like. Thus far, it looks like we have had some success. One, we've completed 2 of the Plan 3 NCR trainings. Roughly graduating 27. I just want to make some notes as you look at that, where it looks at the total numbers in reference to challenges and other things that have come up. We start off with 285, and as the funnel goes down to actually people enrolling, we enrolled 48, each class being roughly full. Then graduating a little bit more, over 50%. 11 are still, well, actually, I'm not sure if 11 are still actively interviewing because we just had some recent placements in the last couple of days. The good news is that as of today, we've placed 22 people in the unions in comparison with phase 1, which we only placed 20. So we're really at a great start for the overall project. If you notice where I mentioned biggest challenge, the challenge that we've had is that this states that people haven't passed the drug test for employment, but only 3. So in the grand scheme of things, we're still moving along, and if only 3 people, they're able to get back and maybe get back in the process, knowing what they need to do in order to pass the test. We've completed a number of OSHA trainings. Overall, as a whole, as you look at that breakdown for the unions, it looks like where their goal they've surpassed. I just understand this is going to be a long process, a long project, so we'll see as we progress those numbers. To date, we have spent or invoiced roughly 1/3 of what was forecasted for that amount. At $109,000, the total amount that balances left is $269. So as far as the budgetary concerns, we're really well under. If we look to forecast what we would still do the 3rd session, we probably will come in at around 150, 160 with some other miscellaneous trainings that will occur based on the needs, maybe 170. It still leaves a substantial amount of resources available for training. And what I go to this point is, I didn't bring this up Monday, I wanted to, but I kind of forgot, is if there is possibility with leftover funds from this training, I would suggest that as a board you consider using that money for internships for students that are coming back from college to get in on the project. I believe they can be counted in the compliance numbers, but then also can really provide opportunities for individuals to get engaged in our economy. Those of those who know me, this is something that's like my mantra. I say it all the time. We have to figure out ways from the city residents, community people, young people who are going to school, doing well, coming back and engaging them in the community. Here's a viable opportunity provided, when we start looking for resources. And it does not have to be the EOC. As a matter of fact, there's probably better organizations than the EOC to do it. But it is an opportunity to use that to help with what we're trying to do as an overall project, and that is equitable economy.
I just want to first commend you for the work that EOC has done, and just from my own experience, you're right. It's one thing to offer sometimes programs, but some of the obstacles, like you said, the biggest challenge is some of those things we don't think about, which is passing. Everybody wants a job, but not everybody
Who's ready?
know how to work. So I just kind of want to commend you on the awesome work that EOC has done. In terms of those numbers overall, are you finding that it is based upon a collaboration? Like, for instance, are you getting other agencies or entities or individuals sending folks to you, or people coming, or the lion's share of people coming to the trainings coming sort of like walk-ins or strictly to EOC?
It's a combination.
Okay.
It's a combination of partnerships that, like for instance, Jubilee Homes has been a valuable partner in recruitment and also involved some of the case management. And there's other partners that we have for other projects. Because once, again, this is a small community as much as we may think it may be big. Once the word gets out that there's an opportunity, individuals who are ready start to come. So I think it's a combination of both. I'll look back and make sure they can't kick me from over there. So
I have one question. So we've recruited almost 300 people. The lion's share were city residents. 84 were interviewed and 48 started the training. What's the plan for the folks who didn't get into the training? Do we circle back with them? What happens?
we continue to keep them engaged in the process. And if you look to under OSHA training, not that those are the exact numbers who are in all the OSHA training, but we're able to provide them another option along with other options that we have in the center. It's much more time-wise. OSHA 10 is 10 hours. And a lot of individuals, as we say, some of them didn't make it just because they were selected out by us. They selected themselves out because they don't have time to be in class for 7 weeks.
Right.
So they can actually obtain employment with OSHA 10.
But you bring
Some
up
of these
a
placements have been OSHA 10 too, excuse me.
But you bring up a good point. Because you're EOC, people may find that this might not be what they think they want, but then there are other options at EOC that they can participate in.
Oh yeah, oh yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Financial report. Guys?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, we have a couple of things that occurred during the month of May, and just a quick overview. We made some debt service payments in May. We also had payments for board approval, and that were approved by the board, and also we had some investment income as well on the bond proceeds, which was kind of nice. I'm just going to go through the actual reports on starting on page 5 if you're following along with me. The first one is the statement of net position, and at the end of May, we had $91 million of Phase 1 and Phase 2 cash, and also included we had total capital assets of $152 million. Compared to the April statements, cash decreased by $7.4 million because we had a debt service payment of $6.8 million, along with $670,000 in vendor payments. Plus, we had an $81,000 increase in investment income based on the bond proceeds. So our total liabilities at the close of May was $190 million, and that includes bonds payable for both Phase 1 and Phase 2, along with the bond anticipation notes for Phase 2 projects. At the end of May, the unaudited total net position is $53.3 million. Now I'm going to go on to page 6, and that shows our statement of sources and expenditures, and that shows all of our current activity for 2017-18. You'll note that we have show the $73 million bond proceeds along with the $3.6 million for capitalized interest that we borrowed for debt service payments that will come due. We also had we have a pass-through of $8.9 million that comes from state aid, the state aid intercept from the district to pay for those debt service payments, and along with that we have the federal subsidy of $714,000, which was captured in prior months. So now we also have earnings on investments is now up to $205,000, which is nice. That's an increase of $81,000 from prior months. And we have capital outlay of $581,000 for Phase 1 and $6.8 million year-to-date for Phase 2. We did make our principal and interest payments here in the month of May, and that totals that $8.9 million that I said earlier. And our operating transfers out was the federal subsidy, which was transferred out to the district. And on the next page, this is our cash flow statement. Now, the cash flow statement represents the cash basis for sources and the disbursements that come through all of our JSCB accounts. The actual figures are shown here on the month of May, and we still have the projected in June. In the month of May, you'll see that we've updated those figures, and we're pretty much on course with what we were projecting in prior months. You'll notice here also in June that we've projected the bond issue, and those will be actuals as of next month when we receive the statements and we can verify all the figures to be sure that they're accurate. And the last page is revenue and expense. And this is from inception to date. This shows the total sources and expenditures from the inception of all through phase 1 and through phase 2. It shows actually what we have taken in and what we've actually spent throughout the life of the project. Anybody have any questions?
Question for that? Great job with your first report to the board. Welcome.
Just one. That's one. Well, maybe you can answer it also, because I'm looking at the furniture in the Capitol.
What page are you on?
Page 8. And I see it in phase 1, so the furniture in the Capitol is not in phase 2? We're not doing anything there.
Right. That just means that we have not spent anything on furniture yet in phase 2. These are actual expenses, okay? I go back to what Tom always calls us. He calls us bean counters, okay? So we count the beans. We count what's actually been spent. So that's what's in that column there. So no furniture has been purchased as of yet. If you want to know what the budget shows, what we're going to spend on FF&E, that's in the budget that Turner Construction puts out. And I believe that was one of your reports that's included on a monthly basis that shows what's in the budget for each school. Okay, does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
There are no other questions, Joe?
Yes, we have several resolutions today, beginning with resolution number 43, which would be the monthly payment to Landon and Ryan.
Motion?
So moved.
Second? Any
Second.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Resolution number 44 would be the monthly payment to Turner Construction.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 45 would be our monthly payments to the various contractors working under the Tranche 1 financing, which are set forth in the appendix.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 46 would be the payment to the various contractors working under the Tranche 2 financing as set forth in the appendix.
So moved.
Second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 47 is somewhat unique in that we don't do it too often. It is the amendment to the comprehensive plan, which is our basic guiding budget document. And this first amendment, as was mentioned during the reports, would increase the overall statutory availability of funds from $291.5 million to the $300 million that we capped at.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 48 would further amend the comprehensive plan to reallocate some of the funds among the different schools, specifically to increase the funding available for Bellevue, Ed Smith, and Westside Academy at Blodgett, while reducing the amount available at Shea Middle School.
So moved. Second?
I have a
Second.
question.
Oh.
Okay, any discussion?
So the difference between these two resolutions is what? The one we just passed?
Yes, so the difference is, one of form, they really can't be done all at once because they're two separate subject matters. So the first resolution raised the overall financing, and then the second resolution within that amount of money reallocated the funds.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Did we have a second? I'm sorry.
Oh,
I made the motion, there was no second.
I did.
see, yeah, and then the discussion, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 49 would award the West Side Academy prime contract to Pack and Associates of Oswego.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 50 would authorize a contract with Day Automation for temperature control systems at the Huntington School.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution number 51 would amend our contract with Labella Associates for their design work on the Ed Smith project due to the increased project scope.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Question,
Yeah.
just what was the, again, the amended scope? What did that entail again?
I know that the total funds available for the project, the construction budget, have been increased.
Right.
For that detail, I'd have to defer to the project manager, though.
Chris, can you just tell me real quick?
Sure, I didn't hear the beginning of the question.
The amended scope for Ed Smith, again, just to remind me?
We increased the budget for the building. We had the ability, we had the MCA capacity there.
Right.
We took bids. The bids were a little bit more than we hoped them to be, or we budgeted them to be, so we had the ability to do that, and that's what this is. And then
Okay.
there's a provision in the contract with the architects that if we increase that construction budget, their fee gets increased proportionally.
Gotcha, thank you.
Question, Labella now is doing 2 schools, not one, or
LaBelle is involved at they were involved at 3.
they were, that's okay.
They were. Now they're involved at Ed Smith and Bellevue.
In Bellevue.
Thank you.
And
I have
Fowler.
a motion. Do I need a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Another point.
Sorry.
Ed Smith and Fowler, sorry.
Ed Smith
Right.
and Fowler.
It's
Thank
tough to keep 14 straight.
you. I can imagine.
Okay. I have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Speaking of Fowler, resolution number 52 would likewise amend Labella's contract at Fowler for a similar reason.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes. Okay, so the Fowler piece is the field, correct? Is that what we're looking at?
It's more, we have 3 components to Fowler. We have the roof, which we have bid and award. We'll have an interiors renovation, which includes the library and the auditorium and some other spaces. And then we have the site work.
Okay, and I know everything you just said about the site work, but see, my concern is this, and I asked you this before, and you said it would be like, what, 14 months or something before it moves. So what happens, again, I'm asked the question when it settles. Do we invest all of this money and we still can't put the field together?
So what we're doing now is evaluating a new strategy to build there. Without going too far into it, and stop me if I'm not going where you want, the design that was bid and we received bids on was to remove a fair amount of soil there, was to go down. And in doing so, we had contaminated soil that we needed to remove. The price came in, it was excessive. So we took a step back and we said, okay, I want to see what we could do to employ a different methodology to build there. And went at it from the perspective of what can we do to not go into the ground. One of several things, but one is to not try and fundamentally dig down and have to deal with the issues that are there, or we think are there. So we engaged another geotechnical engineer who's done a tremendous amount of work in the Syracuse area, has a great reputation. He looked at all the data that we've gathered to date and said, I'd like to do a little bit more. There's a few things more that I would like to do to give me a better perspective on this. So we looked at those things that he wanted to do. We also looked at the methodology that he wants to employ on the site to be able to build there. Had some additional conversations with the county because it involved working in proximity of the Harbor Brook easement that's there. Did that, said, okay, we feel good about the testing that you want to go do it. The next stop sign for that is he does that testing, he does his analysis, and he comes back to us. And as part of that, we'll make a prediction on what that settlement will or won't be in terms of what he knows now. So at that point, we may pause again. I mean, if he comes back and says he's going to come back to us and tell us it's going to settle X amount over X amount of time, and then we need to look at that and make sure that that's something that we can live with in terms of performance.
Because I agree, the kids need a feel, but to how much money before we realize that it may not work?
Correct. Yeah.
So
And that's, I'm sorry, go. Okay.
just a part B to that question. So Resolution 48, we amended the Phase 2 comprehensive plan to 300 million, which is our cap.
Correct.
Is it correct to assume that this adjustment is included in that cap? And where do we go if this plan doesn't work?
Right.
If we just capped out?
Yeah.
So I guess that's where I'm kind of
So
wondering.
just if I could clarify a question. So the resolution is to go to 300.
Yes.
And the difference between that 291 and the 300.
Yes.
We have not allocated that in terms of where
So
it's.
this is not inclusive in that increase?
We are not,
allocation?
right, what we're doing over there is not predicated on this increase from 291 to 300. The budget is, we're still working to develop a design
Okay.
that will fit within the original budget that we had established. Right, right, we're not predicating that on having this 8.5 million difference between 291 and 300.
So you're
Just
doing preventative stuff, really. I mean, kind of, you're looking more, it's more study before you begin to actually do any design build.
Yes, what brought us back to looking at this again, one is the dollars and cents, right? When we received the bids, it just was not, at the price received, it was excess. It was more than what we could spend to do that. So we took a step back and said, is there a better way to accomplish what we're trying to do? How do we mitigate some of the things that we saw that cost more than what we thought they were going to, i.e. a lot of the underground work that had to happen. So we came back with a different methodology. But before we launch that and say, okay, now we're going to go bid it again or fully develop the design, we want them to come, the engineers to come back and tell us what, by everything you've gathered, what is it you think that how this will perform? Is it going to settle an inch in 10 years or is it going to settle 3 feet in 10 years? I mean, we want to understand that before we move into, a phase where we would build there
But
and do that.
financially, the goal is for all of that to happen within the budget
That's our
of
goal.
the school, which is not part
Correct.
of this increase.
Correct.
That's what I want.
Correct.
Thank you.
When he comes back with his evaluation, we're going to regroup obviously and look at budget again and do another estimate based on once we have the methodology employed for it.
I have basically, it's just an aesthetics kind of question. Did you decide was it going to be turf or grass?
Turf is the design,
turf.
correct.
First, gotta find out if it's gonna work.
It's gonna be level, right?
Thanks, you answered.
Is there an
No
estimated
worries.
date for the engineer's report? I'm sorry if I missed that.
The testing hasn't happened, and then it's about 3 months.
months.
I'll just state that, just, the testing has to happen, then it goes to a lab, and then they have to do the lab analysis, and then the lab analysis comes back, and the engineer does his thing with it, so about 3 months.
So that would provide the board with kind of a final decision point to go
Correct.
forward.
Correct. We would be coming back here this, before the end of the year to be able to say, here's the findings, here's what it is, here's what we think it'll cost. And then determine, and then if it's acceptable, moving towards procurement to follow the same trajectory as a lot of the T2 schools. Just did that in the first quarter of 19.
Thank you.
Counselor Rudd, do you have a question?
I woke up and went and walked around Magnolia Street and Fowler this morning because, as I understand it, the considerations to the alternative are like this raised field instead of like disrupting the soil in the site in front. But there does seem, and I think this is a question, do we need a track or do we just want a football and soccer field. And it seems like a football soccer field could fit on that northwest site that has a baseball field, even with the houses that are there. And then if there was a track, there are the 7 houses that are on Magnolia Street that I don't think we want to take any houses, but I do think looking at alternate sites should be part of this. I'm not sure what knowledge we have of those soils. It is slightly higher, and I think the issue, because Harbor Brook is right there, so it seems like the soil might be, I don't know anything about this, but it does seem like there are alternate locations where a football field, soccer field might fit, and given the cost of the current site, I just think we should be open to that site. I'm not sure what goes into it and how burdensome it is, but with the costs seemingly so much higher than what we anticipated for a field normally, I just think that site could be viable and would suggest that it be considered. There's a map. It's in Mr. Giardini's comments because I walked around with him. But thank you.
Thank you.
Have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any other item from the board? Any other discussion? If not, thank you, Deputy Mayor Owens, for representing the mayor this morning.
I know I lost my timing flow, but I was okay.
You're back.
Welcome back.
Never lost it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. See you next month.